Feeling a little unsettled and stressed with the way things are in our world? Experience the peace of Jesus with Finding Peace, our 5-day devotional. Visit purposely.com to sign up. Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com.
Hey friends, you're listening to the AllMomDoes podcast, part of the Purposely Podcast Network. I am your fearless host, Julie Lyles Carr. We love bringing you content for exactly where you're living today, whether that is trying to figure out how to get through a day with toddlers or what your next is when those kids have headed off to college and you're taking a look going, I wonder what God has for me next. I am so delighted today to bring in a veteran, accomplished podcaster, author, consultant, all the things. You probably have been seeing her around a lot on your algorithm. I know that I have, because she has a new book out that I think really speaks to the heart, particularly for a lot of us who are trying to figure out what our purpose is, where we're headed, what we're supposed to be doing, even in the midst of all the stuff we're doing. So I am so excited and delighted to introduce you to my new friend, Mary Marantz. Mary, thanks so much for being here today.
Oh, Julie, thanks so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this since we got it on the calendar, so can't wait to jump in.
Well, I so appreciate all the variety of things that you talk about and teach on. You have such a unique approach when it comes to allowing us to take a look at the things that we're doing in our lives and ask some of those scary questions. Am I on the right path? Am I doing the stuff I'm supposed to be doing? But I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, because part of what is so compelling about you is where you got your start. My dad is someone, and the listeners probably heard me talk about before. He was born in rural Mississippi, literally in a log cabin, dirt floor, knew that education was his way out, went into the university setting, and ultimately worked on the space shuttle program and did all kinds of things. But I can tell you that kind of start had some really long-term implications, some of which were really powerful, some of which were some things that I think he fought, feeling like, would he ever be enough? Could he ever, prove himself enough? And your backstory has some interesting correlations. So tell the listener where you got your start, what your early life was like, and where you are today.
Yeah, I always kind of joke that the sort of elevator pitch version of my story, or the movie trailer version of my story, is I grew up in a single wide trailer in rural West Virginia. I always like to emphasize the single wide part. This was not a very nice double wide with a permanent foundation. It was basically a giant tin can that, bought in the late 1970s. I was born in 1980. My mom was 17 when they got married. Both of them barely graduated high school. My dad went to work in the woods as a logger when he was 12. She came home from school one day at 15, and there was a note from her mom that said, "You're old enough to take care of yourself. The bills are paid through the end of the month. There's some macaroni and tomatoes in the cabinet.
Wow.
Good luck." And so both of them really, they didn't necessarily always agree on a lot. They are no longer together, but they did agree that their only daughter, their only child, was going to get an education and was going to have a better, easier life than they did. And so there's all kinds of nuance I get into in my first book, Dirt, about, both that my story can be hard and also be easier than they had it. There's this tension between, honoring where you came from and also saying this ends with me. And so anyway, we're beyond elevator pitch. It was a very tall building at this point.
Yeah.
But fast forward in that story, I end up at Yale for law school. And, Julie, when I trace those dominoes back of how on earth did that even happen? It was my dad coming home with these workbooks when I was 4 years old, getting ready to start kindergarten. And every time I finished a grade, we just went up a level so that when I started kindergarten, I was in a 6th grade reading level and a 5th grade math. And so I started ahead of the curve. They call you smart, and you rise to the labels that get put on you, that these labels can either be a lifeline or a lifelong curse.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I've noticed in my dad's own life story as I look over yours, and of course your amazing book, Dirt, one of the things that's really fascinating to me is I think it's easy to see the correlation of, oh, wow, if you come from really humble beginnings and you push really hard and you get yourself educated and you achieve a level of success, that is such a story, a hero's journey we're familiar with. But I've also noticed too, Mary, that sometimes for people, if they were raised in privilege, or if dad was a really well-known pastor, And they end up being underestimated too, because there comes a level where it's like, well, of course you should be able to do XYZ. Look where you came from. So one of the things that I love in your new book, Underestimated, is I think regardless of our origin story, as fascinating as those stories are and as much as they can drive us, I think all of us, no matter what we're born into, can experience this phenomenon of being underestimated. What for you was the genesis, the spark where you thought, you know what? I've had this beautiful book, Dirt, that's done so well, such a gorgeous memoir with so many jewels in it. Now I want to write about fill in the blank. And you decided that underestimated was the topic. What was that for you?
Well, I feel like I've been preparing for this book for 45 years. I'll be 45 in just about 10 days, actually.
Okay. Happy birthday.
And thank you. I think that there's a combination of factors, right? So there is there's truly a phenomenon, and I feel very drawn to a lot of people who that is their origin story. Of Viola Davis, for example. A Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson actually is kind of a I get a lot of inspiration from him. There's this switch that flips in us, and it allows us to really put our foot on the gas pedal. I mean, really put our, I say in both Dirt and there's an immediate follow-up in between that and Underestimated called Slow Growth Equals Strong Roots, that sometimes people look at a story like this and they see all the success that follows and they feel like, so what? Like the side effect is untethered success. Like, how hard can that be? And I say that I wanted to include this imagery of the girl in the red cape escaping her way out of the deep, dark woods, the big bad wolf ripping at her heels. She runs because she knows if she stops running, it just might kill her. These, branches clawing and scratching at her clothes and her skin, leaving pieces of her behind like breadcrumbs. I look finally breathless and, at last exhausted over my shoulder, and I see it. I am the girl in the red cape, but I am also the wolf. And that voice in my head telling me to run and not stop running, that voice is my own. And I included that imagery in both of those books, the second time in Slow Growth from the perspective of the wolf, because I wanted people to understand how primal, visceral survival it can be for some of us, to feel like if we do this healing to get past where we grew up, what if we lose all our drive in the process? What if we just disappear altogether? So there's that whole side of me. And then you add in that I'm an introvert and I have a gentle spirit and a tender heart. I'm a very empathetic person. I have a very soft voice. I don't walk into a room and suck all the oxygen out of it. And so most of those like cocktail networking party events that I ever go to, all the cool kids congregate together. They somehow find each other. I don't know if they have a bat signal or what, but they know somehow. Maybe it's like a secret handshake. I don't know. I'm not in it, clearly. And I wrote recently on Instagram, do not sit me at the cool kids table. I promise you the conversations are all
So
the
true.
same. This one-upmanship and rubbing elbows till the elbow patches fall off. Instead, put me in the corner. Plant me like a wallflower. I promise you it's where some of the most interesting people in the room are. And so I feel like I've spent my whole life being underestimated. And I sit down to write this book. The idea picks me. It comes to me. And I'm like, amazing. We're going to take down all the people who've never seen the magic in us. And the book goes, yeah, it's going to be about 20% that, because that's a thing that exists. But it's also going to be 80% when you do it to yourself. It held my hands when it told me that part. And I didn't see that coming.
Yeah. That place where we are, I love this imagery that we often are the ones chasing ourselves and keeping ourselves at such a pace. And I have a close friend who has always been so driven. I myself have dealt with it as an oldest child, only girl, type A, all the things. And one of the things that this friend and I had an opportunity to talk about was truly their fear that if they stopped living at that pace, if they stopped running, they would stop altogether, instead of saying what actually is survivable and scalable. Mary, it makes me think about at the age and stage of life that I'm in, I've always been a long distance runner. And then all of a sudden, long distance running was not my friend anymore. I was like, well, why isn't this work? Like, this is how I've always exercised. I'm not coordinated enough to do much of anything else, but this I can do. And there are all these studies now coming out that talk about that we really need to be doing what's called zone 2 cardio, not the hard stuff like I was doing, because it creates all this cortisol in the body. And then you find yourself at a certain stage where you can't outrun the cortisol. You're actually making more of it. That's what I think a lot about when I think about your message, that we often are the ones underestimating ourselves. We are the ones pushing ourselves so hard. And in the doing, we do it to our own peril, even though we are getting places.
That's right.
So, tell
Yeah.
me about what it means for women in particular, because often I think that we do come from a place where we have been underestimated. We're having to prove a little bit harder. We're not
Mm.
making as much per the dollar that a guy is making, all the things. And when we
Mhm.
re-enter that arena, whether that's after a pause for motherhood or whether that is switching careers or figuring some things out, trying something new, we feel like we have to hit the ground running. We feel like we have to prove that we
Mm.
can do this thing in such a short amount of time. How does our culture play in addition to the fact
Mm.
that we're often chasing our own tails?
Yeah.
For women, how for women do we often feel and respond to this message of being underestimated?
Yeah, I mean, Julie, there's not a woman I know who has not experienced being in a meeting at work or in school, whatever the case was, and being interrupted with the thing that she was literally in the process of saying by, a guy to
Yes.
say, "Oh, hey, what if we did this?" It's like I was literally saying that.
Yeah.
Or just, spoken over or, minimized or the language is just sort of like, that's cute. That's cute that you have opinions about the trajectory of your career. And I always think about, I think it was Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire, right? That she had to do everything Fred did, but backwards in heels.
In heels.
And I think that feels like the standard, right? We not only have to do it, we have to go in with A++ excellence, just to even feel like we're being taken seriously. And there's a few places in the book where I kind of give a little wink and a nod to that. There's a part where it says, like, it's talking about how we believe we have to rip ourselves up into shreds. It's in the inner critic chapter. So criticism is an inside job, chapter 12. It's talking about this belief that, there's this part of us that we don't like to talk about, let alone excavate down to, that thinks how hard we are on ourselves is one of the most impressive, interesting things about us. We can't just go into a new situation without ripping ourselves to shreds first. What are we? C- frat boys turned to C-suite corner office? Every
Yeah.
mediocre boss you've ever had, that one dude on the Zoom call who dominates every conversation.
Right.
And so it is very much, kind of a nod to that meme that went around of like, I hope I have the confidence of like a really average dude in a boardroom, whatever. So that's for sure something women have dealt with. And if you have experienced that, or maybe you were in the workforce and then you took a break to raise some kids and you're thinking about going back in, and that is a feeling, you feel like that time of your life is going to be underestimated or discredited or minimized or disqualifying, whatever. I think you'll find yourself in this book a lot because it is just all of those lies of fear. The whole backbone of the book is that fear is a really boring liar. And when we boil it down, the same broken scripts, on repeat, Mad Lib style, it uses on me, it uses on you, Julie, it really uses on everybody listening, but it convinces us we're the only one. And so kind of chapter by chapter, like I mentioned, are all these different faces of fear: procrastination, people-pleasing, perfectionism, imposter syndrome, overthinking, self-sabotage, even a fear of success, 14 in total. And we're just going to go. I'm just like, you're going to get to watch me like Rocky style, go the distance,
Right.
round by round, toe to toe with these different faces of fear and really deep dive into what is the thing behind the thing, the fear behind the fear. And how do we actually not, it's kind of like Sarah Rice on the This Changes Everything podcast said, it's like pulling back the curtain on The Wizard of Oz. There's just a little guy standing back there. I said, yes, a snake oil salesman who wants to sell us on the grift that given the choice between creating nothing and creating failure, any kind of failure at all, it would be safer to go on creating nothing.
Nothing. Yeah. I find that to be so true for myself with writing clients I work with people I'm helping, develop a marketing campaign, and you can feel it sometimes where people just hit a point they're almost paralyzed because they're so afraid of something not working. It feels safer to not even put a toe out there at all.
Yeah.
Do you find there's a common thread, these different faces of fear that you identify? And there's a fear behind the fear, but do you find that there are a couple that seem to be the most common and maybe the most common for women that they grapple with?
Yeah, I think it's the fear of being seen. I think the fear of being seen has two branches. One is that's going to bring criticism, and that feels fatal. And the other is this fear of sort of being found out. That is really what the definition of imposter syndrome is. The fear of being found out as a fraud, that you don't actually have what it takes. Any of these things that you have happened to you happened by luck or it was a mistake. The first day of orientation at Yale Law School, Julie, they sat us all in the auditorium, the Levinson Auditorium, and they gave this speech. And they said, every single one of you is sitting there right now thinking your admission was a mistake, that we're going to come tap you on the shoulder and take your letter back at any second. And we need to start from that place. And I still sat in that room and said, nobody else in this room is feeling that way. Even though it's part of the official speech, I thought it was just me. And so I think that fear of being seen, the whole book has this running metaphor of pushing a boulder up the mountain, getting almost to your breakthrough moment, and then you freeze, Wile E. Coyote about to get his comeuppance style when you make eye contact with everyone watching at home. Just for a second, we're the kind of people who defy gravity, but then we blink. We lose our grip, we lose our way, and the boulder rolls all the way back down the mountain. And it is that just like, wait, somebody's going to listen to this episode? Just kidding. Someone's going to read this book? Just kidding. And so I think we don't want to be seen because we don't want to be criticized and because we don't want to be scrutinized to find out maybe we didn't have what it takes after all.
I think there is underestimating language that comes out of our own mouths. That's very interesting. I find, and I do not find this as much in the guys that I work with, but man, do I find it with the women who will say, well, yeah, I'm working on this and this, but it's just a little thing. Or I was thinking about da-da-da-da-da, but that's secondary to these, higher values in my life. And there's this undercurrent of, to be accepted as a woman, you need to not overstate the things you're excited about, passionate about, lest you be seen as, reaching or going beyond. It's a very interesting economy that I have encountered many times.
Yeah.
It's probably one of the number one questions I get being a mom of 8 kids. And that question is, what on earth are y'all doing about college? And I can tell you, with 8 different kids, 8 different learning styles, 8 different ideas about what the kids want when it comes to their careers and all of the rest, college has been a big topic of conversation around here. Well, there is a university that I want you to know about because it just hits so many of the things that are really important when it comes to considering your kids' college education. George Fox University, it's the #1 private school in Oregon. It's a Christian university. It's located in the heart of the Pacific Northwest. And what's so great is in addition to a top-notch education, students have the opportunity to grow and deepen their faith. And they can learn in this really pivotal time in their lives who God made them to be. Let's face it. We need more people coming out of our universities who know how to be leaders and how to be leaders with character. And George Fox University offers more than 60 academic majors. And that includes a nationally recognized engineering program, a nursing program. It allows your student to pursue their passions and prepare for the calling that God has for them. And let's not forget about fun when it comes to college. George Fox University students have a great student life. There are weekly campus events, there's chapel, there's service opportunities. There are 23 NCAA Division III athletic teams. Here's something that is important to me. There's a study abroad opportunity. So if your student wants to go and experience life somewhere else for a semester, they can do that. There's outdoor recreation because, of course, we're talking about Oregon, so gorgeous. George Fox University could be just the perfect fit for your student as you are looking into college, career, and all that goes beyond. George Fox University, where your student will learn and thrive in the center of it all. Now, you talk about that we need to go through a process that you call the shift. And you're clear to say that this is not a dial, that we're not trying to turn up or turn down. So talk to me about what this means, how we move from this place of underestimating ourselves, let others underestimate us, to not really be honest and clear about the things that we want to head toward. How do we go through this shift? What is it? How do we do it?
Yeah, I love that question. And I love what you're saying right before that, because I actually have a whole section in the book that says, let's stop saying little.
Yeah.
Let's stop saying little. Let's stop saying it to one another. I've actually started in just sort of a little, in a subtle form of resistance.
I like the swap out there, Mary.
Thank you. It's in there. It's insidious if you don't pay attention. In the subtle form of resistance, I do a few things. And then I'm going to talk about the shift. I will, if somebody says, "Oh gosh, I saw your little Instagram post where you were talking about that," and I'll say, honestly, like that was actually, I love that you read that. That was like really heart-wrenching to actually get down on the page. So I promise you, it didn't feel little to me, and it's like people don't even know they're doing it, but it's just a little bit of a correction of like, ooh, maybe I'll pay attention to that from here forward. A couple other ones is like, I think this is a form of like the silent resistance here is I've been putting this book out. I've been saying, I know you're going to love it. It's just so good. I'm so proud of it, period. as if that is a complete sentence, to put our work into the world and call it good. Instead of being like, oh, I wish I could have had a little more time with that. Or, I know like this, none of this is like new. Or, oh, I know other people have da da da. Like, no, it's really good. You're going to love it. And if somebody says they really like it, thank you, period, as if it is a full sentence. So these are actually, what I'm describing there are actually very small shifts, because they seem small, they seem little, but what's actually happening is you are becoming a person each time you do it who trains people on how to talk to you and how to treat you.
Yes.
Who trains yourself that you are putting excellence into the world, and you can acknowledge that, and it is not arrogant or prideful or some false sense of confidence. It's, no, I actually know this is going to help people. I know that if people read this book start to finish, we're talking about nothing short of family generational change, family tree generational change.
Right.
I said that on a podcast during one of these many podcasts. That was a fella who was doing the interviewing, and I said that, and he goes, well, I guess like nothing like dreaming big. Wow. And I was just like, no, that's not it. I know what it's going to do. Right. So it's like that, just kind of holding the line. So the small, simple shift, that's right from the subtitle, the surprisingly simple shift to quit playing small, name the fear, and move forward anyway. Like you said, I read an article once that said the best ideas they are a switch, not a dial. They don't just turn the volume up on what we were already thinking. They find a way to flip that thinking on its very head. And so the common wisdom, this sort of Nike approach to coaching that says, just do it, leap and the net will appear. Listen, I've said that before myself. I'm not hating on anybody who says leap and the net will appear. It's not great aeronautics advice, to be sure. But I understand the sentiment. But the common wisdom to quit playing small is you must always go big. And Julie, I've had so many go big moments in my life. I'm a big fan of the go big moment in reality. I love the headline days. Right. I love the throw the confetti days, the get into Yale days, the sign a 5-book deal with my publisher days, the coast to coast speaking tour with my face on the side of a tour bus days. These are days, that I'll think back on, when I recap my life and go, well, those were pretty cool.
That was pretty
fun.
Did
that. There's no regret.
Yeah, right.
The problem is the very next day, we don't talk enough about the day after the hero gets everything they ever wanted.
Yeah.
And we go right back to playing small and doubting ourselves. And feeling like an imposter because those were things that feel like they happened to us, not something that got down into the very core of our identity. Aristotle talks about basically like what we do every day is who we become, that is a habit, not a single act to be motivated. And so when we actually show up every day and we do this small shifts, like holding the line when people talk to us and call our work little, or doing one very small, simple, hard thing, there's a whole science behind that we can talk about called Bayesian brain theory. We are actually, building the muscle, doing the reps to become that person. And the last thing I'll say, this is from Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. He talks about the difference between goals and intentions. And when you set a goal, you only get to, celebrate and throw the confetti on one day, the day the goal comes true. But when you set an intention, meaning every single day I wake up and I say, who does Mary have to be today in order to one day stand in the shoes of the person who can hold that goal and hold it well with both character and craft?
Right.
And every day that I choose to do that, I'm becoming that person. That is a day I can celebrate. So the surprisingly simple shift is we think to quit playing small, we have to always go big. But ironically and paradoxically, some of the most important work we will do to quit playing small is actually by starting small and becoming the grown-up in the room who can be trusted.
Right. So powerful. And we do live in this culture that is so goal-oriented, big, big, hairy goal, put it out there, really push toward that. And yet I've had the experience, I'm sure you have, I'm sure the listener has as well, where you have that moment. I can remember one where I was supposed to be on stage. I worked for months to get in a certain level of shape because I wanted to wear this particular, I had the whole vision, Mary. I was going to wear this particular thing. I was going to say this particular thing. It was going to go this way. It was going to go this way. And I did all the disciplines I needed to do to hit that thing. And when that day came, there was a technical challenge. And I ended up needing to be backstage and dealing with that technical challenge and, skirts tied up to be able to deal with it, on and on and on. And I can remember the day after, all of a sudden, the peanut M&Ms and the cake and all the things that had not been on my radar when that goal did not happen the way that I envisioned it. I was really left with the dregs of, well, then what has all this been for? And I can look back now and laugh and think, man, I'd had this really beautiful success in having a discipline, training myself to get to a certain point, but I wasn't willing to acknowledge it unless I had this moment in the spotlight that through no one's fault, just a series of circumstances didn't happen. And
Yeah.
it was that realization of, man, this thing that I've been chasing and that's been chasing me, which is me, as per your theory, accurate,
Mhm.
doesn't always acknowledge the success that is the path. And I know we can say that in a way that's
Yeah.
cliche, but man, I missed it on that one. I really, really missed it. I
Yeah.
love the permission you give us to call something good. I mean, it's what God does in his creation, right? He
That's
created
right.
this and he called it good, and he created
That's right.
that and he called it good. He models for us at the top of his best-selling book exactly how we should be celebrating the things that we do in the creative that are plenty. They're enough. They're
Mm.
good. And yet so often I think we think he wouldn't want us to do that, that it only
Yeah.
counts if we minimize it. So thank you for that permission to
Mhm.
appreciate when that creative power comes from him and we create something,
That's
we
right.
can call it good and rest in that. I also like that you just talked about holding the line
Mhm.
in terms of a standard about
Yeah.
how we're going to allow others and ourselves to speak to us. I think that's something that I've not done a good job on in the past is holding a certain standard, even though I hold it for others. Like there are things I would
Mm.
never say to somebody in a spirit of encouraging them, in a spirit of believing in them, and yet I allow myself to say it
Yeah.
about my own stuff, or
Right.
I'll allow someone to say it in a meeting rather than gently but firmly holding the line. Thank you for that. I think that's really powerful. Okay, I want to hear about this Bayesian brain theory. Like you
Yeah.
just got my little science nerd going. No, tell me about that. I want to hear about
Yeah.
that. Okay, so a little bit
Yeah.
tangential, but I want to hear about this.
No, it's so good because that really is sort of one. There's a lot of pillars of science and psychology throughout the book that back up the theory of this. It's really about the small shifts, but this is one of the biggest ones. Bayesian brain theory is more commonly known as predictive brain theory, and it essentially means that your brain is an incredible prediction machine. Like take this thing to Vegas, baby. It's got those kind of odds.
Yeah.
When you're going to start something big, like writing a book or starting a new big project, it has the ability to look at it and calculate with great accuracy whether or not you will be able to succeed at it. And if it does not believe you will be able to succeed at it, then it does something called the amygdala hijack, where it's sort of like a record scratch and a 90-degree turn, just
Mhm.
kidding. That's that just kidding moment. Let's go over here instead and do some low risk, low effort, quick reward, instant gratification activity instead. And it does that as a form of immediate mood repair. Like your brain is just constantly always trying to feel better. It's not
Right.
necessarily trying to grow you or expand your capacity for stewardship or to be outside your comfort zone. It's like, how do we survive the day? And we do that by feeling good, by watching Mrs. Maisel and eating M&Ms instead of writing that book. Purely hypothetically speaking.
Yeah, of course. I'm sure I know no one like this, Mary.
Right. But so the cool part about Bayesian brain theory is that it is constantly updating the model with new sensory inputs and new data. So it's going to base its prediction on what has always been true before, what has always worked before. And so when you become a person who today decide that you're going to do something small, it's got to be manageable, but something that is tough for you, something that is outside of your comfort zone, something that feels pretty scary, even though it's small, like scarier in proportion than the size of what the actual thing is. And you do that today, and you do it again this afternoon, and you do it tomorrow. What you are doing is putting new drops in the piggy bank, new inputs into the program, into the prediction model, and your brain will update. What you're saying to it is, look, we can do hard things.
Right.
We can sit through the edginess of not knowing the answer and being outside our comfort zone and staring at the judgment of the blinking cursor and not run away. Your brain will go, cool, updating the model. Now there's like a 50-50 chance that you'll succeed or 60-40, and it will not immediately sabotage you away from doing your most important hard work, right? This idea of like distracted work, the marking something on your to-do list you've already done just to mark it off.
Right.
Distracted work will never be your legacy. Deep work will. And so the more we do hard things, the more we can do hard things because your brain will actually cooperate.
It's so powerful to know that we do have that level of influence on the way our brains work. When we think about how we're thinking and the way that we can drive that, it's such a powerful, powerful tool to know about.
Yeah.
Well, I know our time is drawing short, but I did want to ask you about something that I find compelling in your writing, and that is the concept for a lot of us that we think if we can make something perfect, it's going to keep us safe.
Oh,
And
yeah.
what a liar that one is. But unpack that for me, how you've seen that show up in your own life and what we can do to get past this barrier of perfectionism.
Yeah, so each of the chapters have really fun names, but I think chapter 10 is my favorite. That is perfectionism is hiding with better PR. So I
Yeah,
like to imagine
yes.
that, Hiding went out and hired the same marketing team that Cauliflower did when it convinced all of us that it was pizza
Yeah.
or rice or whatever.
Exactly.
It got a glow up in the form of a
Yeah.
rebrand because we're actually happy to say, that's a very socially acceptable thing to say amongst your friends. Like, well, of course I haven't sent my book proposal into that agent who sent me a DM yet because I just need to go through it one more time and rethink that one part. I want to rework that section over there. I'm just such a perfectionist.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Of course I haven't launched that website yet. I'm just such a perfectionist. What we're not willing to say is, hi, I'm Mary. I'm hiding in plain sight. Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
I'm afraid it's not any good. I'm afraid I'll be criticized. I'm afraid I'll be heartbroken. I'm afraid I don't have what it takes. Or I'm afraid that if I say this thing, this dream I can't go a day without thinking about out loud, I might actually have to go do something about it.
Yeah.
And so we think perfect can keep us safe because there's actually this lie in our head that says there's a perfect version of my book, of your book, of this course, of that website, of this podcast, of the presentation you're going to do at work, whatever it is, parenting, parenting,
Yep.
that there's some perfect version where no one on planet Earth will ever criticize you ever again, will ever hurt you again. And in the year of our Lord, 2025, if we say that out loud and don't laugh immediately, then we're not paying attention.
Yeah.
We're not paying attention. There's literally nothing we can get everybody to agree on. People don't like Nutella. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah,
It's that whole
how
idea.
do you, that's the world we live in, Mary. It's hard
that's
to
right.
accept, but there we are.
But on a deeper level, Julie, I also talk in that book about how when my mom left when I was 9, I talk about that in Dirt. And that was the first time I sort of learned to use perfect as both a weapon and a protection, that I determined right then and there to go out and build a life so beautiful, so exceptional, so perfect on the outside that it would make her regret missing any of it. And I said, of course, there's this really beautiful scene in Dirt where it talks about it reminds me of like a daisy growing wild in scorched earth, this fertile ground that grew it, revenge wasteland, the wilting petals being scorched from the heat that it grew in. And it says, at first glance, you could call it beauty from ashes, this making a beautiful life out of a really hard one. But the wilting, withering question is, how long can we really survive that way?
Right.
And so it kind of goes on to talk about we just think if we're finally perfect enough, we will at last be chosen, accepted, find belonging, be loved. Let's just call it what it is. We think if we're perfect enough, no one will ever leave us again. And it just doesn't work that way because the fear that it gives way, that it belies, our most deeply held fear is maybe without all this more, we were never somebody worth staying for to begin with.
That is so profound because for a lot of us, and particularly those of us who have so many facets to our lives, whether that's through business, through a marriage, through parenthood, we want to try to protect the results. We want to try to ensure and guarantee the results. And we don't get to do that. I have seen parents I would have called as nearly perfect as I could have ever imagined. And their kids went a direction they never expected. I have seen spouses who were as near to perfect as I could have ever thought. And I thought we're far better at doing the whole marriage thing than my broken self certainly is. And yet have seen them have results they didn't expect. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean, hey, because we can't guarantee those things, why not just go full out, grow as we can, try new things, do what we can. It helps build a fearlessness when we stop thinking that perfection is the ultimate shield. I really appreciate you bringing that up. Well, Mary, I feel like I could keep going on and on and on, but you are a busy lady with lots of stuff going on, and I want to respect that. I just so appreciate you being on today. Listener, hey, Mary's got a podcast. You need to go check it out. I love to listen to it. The Mary Marantz Show. I want you to go check that out. And where can the listener find your books, all the different things that you're doing, those great pearls of wisdom that you just seem to sling around like wheat in the field? I'm like, how does she think of all this stuff? So tell the listener where to go.
So if you head over to namethefear.com, that's from the subtitle, namethefear.com, we have the whole website up there for the book. We can read, all the endorsements, check out all the chapters. And then we actually have the entire first chapter up there for free that you can download right now and start reading right away. Get a feel for that very lyrical, metaphorical, IQ meets EQ style of writing that I have. It's presenting that problem I talked about of, starting over is a rolling boulder. And why does it always feel so much harder for us than it seems to feel for everyone else? Why do we keep dropping the ball right there at the last minute before the breakthrough? So you can check that out at namethefear.com. And then while you're there, if you scroll down, you'll see my achiever quiz is there. There are 5 different achiever types: the performer, the tightrope walker, the masquerader, the contortionist, and the illusionist in the distance. That depending on your type, you're going to play small in different ways, and you're going to need different things to get unstuck and move forward. And so super fun in the questions, takes like 2 minutes, super deep in the results. I'll tell you how to get unstuck based on your type. And you can find all of that at namethefear.com. And then come over to @Mary Marantz on Instagram, MARANTZ, and tell me what achiever type you got.
That would be so fun. I love me a good assessment. I'm so excited. All right, listener, I want you to check it out. The book is Underestimated: The Surprisingly Simple Shift to Quit Playing Small, Name the Fear, and Move Forward Anyway. Mary Marantz, I just can't thank you enough for being on today.
Thanks so much for having me, Julie.
All right, listener, you know your next step. That's to go to the show notes. That's because our amazing Rebecca puts together all the links, all the good stuff. So you can go straight over there, find all the great things that Mary was explaining to us, and you can interact more and discover more about how to work in this world of being underestimated for your best next. I love it too when you come and check out Julie Lyles Carr over mainly on Instagram. I love when you come to the DMs and tell me about guests and topics that you're excited about. And also, as you know, AllMomDoes on the socials, allmomdoes.com. It's a great community for you, for right where you're living, the season of life you're in. You're going to find other women there who are asking the same kind of questions and sharing the same kind of wisdom. So be sure and check out AllMomDoes, and I'll see you next time on the AllMomDoes podcast.
Are you looking for a distinctly Christian education? A place where your child can be challenged with academic rigor through a biblical worldview? Consider King's Schools.
England, and I'm a proud student of the King's Schools graduating class of 2025. Being a King's Knight has made a significant impact on my faith and future. Next year, I will be studying health sciences at Texas Christian University. Because of King's Schools, I walk confidently in God's perfect plan for my life, with the lasting friendships that have shaped me along the way. If you're considering enrolling at King's Schools next year, I assure you, you will find an incredible home and family here at King's that will last a lifetime.
Sign up for a tour of King's Schools by June 30th, and if you enroll, mention purposely and pay no application fee. Visit gokings.org for more. Building resilient disciples of Christ through Christian education for 75 years. gokings.org.